Welcome back to the NAESP Principal Podcast. My name is Liz Garden. I am the proud principal of the Henry P. Clough Elementary School in Mendon, Massachusetts, and I have the privilege of being one of the fellows for the Center for Innovative Leadership with NAESP. And I am joined today by my co-fellow, who I will turn it over to for him to introduce himself, and our special guest today.
Nice. Hey, everybody. Scott McLeod, a professor of school leadership at the University of Colorado, Denver. We're delighted to spend some time today with Amy McElroy. She's the elementary school director for STEM School here in Highlands Ranch, Colorado. So right down the road from my office, which is pretty fun. And in this episode, we're really going to try and unpack what active hands-on STEM and PBL can really look like in the elementary grades. Amy, before we dive in, let's start by having you introduce yourself a little further to our NAESP audience. Tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, how you got to this point in your career. We'll kind of start with some easy stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you guys so much for having me on today. Just, a little bit about me. I started off my career as a high school science teacher, spending most of my time teaching chemistry. And then, I went to graduate school and Scott was my professor. And after I graduated, I started out my kind of admin career as the dean at STEM, which is where I'm currently at. And then after a couple of years there, became the elementary director. And just, a little bit about like STEM school itself, like we are a K-12 charter school in Highlands Ranch. We actually are under the Douglas County School District. So they're the ones who oversee kind of our site license and all of that stuff. But I oversee everything kind of K-5. So
Awesome. And I'm gonna ask you first just a little bit more about, your school community, but definitely gonna come back to your journey from a chemistry teacher to an elementary director. I'm gonna revisit that one in a little bit. But just tell us a little bit more about, your school, what the community's like, who are the students and families that you serve, and what are some of the key components of the learning model at your school?
yeah, absolutely. So, like I said, we're a charter school. So that means parents choose to come to us. We don't have an articulation area like you see in most like neighborhood schools within our district. So we draw families from all over the Denver metro area. I have families that drive from Castle Rock, which is about 45 minutes from our school. I have families that drive from Thornton, which I know people aren't familiar with that, but that's about an hour away. It's up north on the north side of the city. So they're coming from all over the place to come specifically to our school. And I think that speaks just a lot to what we do here and how we kind of operate. We're considered a problem-based learning school. That's kind of our model under this like idea of STEM. So we do have a STEM focus, but really what drives us is this problem-based learning model. And to kind of sum that up, because when you say PBL, a lot of people think project-based learning, but we really focus on problems. And so it's that idea that like our students are solving authentic problems that provide them like real world applications to be able to create and do good in the world. Um, we really have kind of a culture of doing here at STEM. Another super cool thing that I think about us is we're really diverse. So when you look at like the racial diversity of Highlands Ranch, Colorado, and the schools within Douglas County, they're not very diverse, but STEM, we like stand out in that. And so I think we draw a lot of families because of that diversity that we offer here. So we celebrate culture on top of all the like other cool things that we do. And I think that just speaks to our really kind of unique student body that we have. It's pretty awesome, honestly.
Nice. Amy, you and I have known each other a long time, and I've visited your school several times, each of which was phenomenal. I've been in, the high school, middle grades, elementary, the whole bit. One of the things I'd love for you to talk about is how STEM school thinks about the learning tasks that your students engage in and why. I think some people come away from visits to STEM school pretty intimidated because in addition to sort of like the problem-based approach, there seems to be a really high level of academic press there. And I don't know if that makes sense, but like you all take your achievement, like traditional achievement scores seriously within this PBL space. I don't know how to characterize that other than just to say that, there seems to be some really high expectations for students there. And I wonder if that model or that level of academic press, or, sort of the ways that your students engage, is for everybody. So can you just talk about some of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really like good question, interesting point. We do have really high academic standards and expectations, but I don't think it's coming from the educators. It's not that we're saying you must reach this level. It's really, I think it speaks to our learning model, and the students want to rise to those expectations.
So it's not like an academic grind there.
No, not at all. Like, I mean, we do a lot of parent tours and stuff, and one of the questions I always get is like, how much homework? Like, are my kids going to be doing hours and hours of homework outside of school? And the answer to that is no. One of the pillars that we really have that's kind of fundamental to our programming is that character development. So, yeah, we're focusing on the academics, but we're also talking about elementary children. So, we're also focusing on the kind of that whole child or that character development so they're able to grow up to be great human beings. So, in terms of like that academic pressure, a lot of it is just because our learning model is so unique and we allow students to really problem solve and think critically and collaborate that they're rising to this academic level.
Awesome. Well, so it's interesting as you talk about like, thinking about these are elementary kids that we're talking about. So I want to go back and revisit. Like you, I started my career. Well, actually, I started as elementary and then I went up to high school biology. And then I've worked my way back down. So, like tell us a little bit about how your journey to go from high school. And I'm going to be honest, like chemistry, that was actually the thing that turned me away from wanting to be a doctor. That was what I was going to do. But organic chemistry was like, nope. But so how did you go from, the high school science teacher to now being a director of, as you said, little humans who we want to grow up to be big, good humans? Tell us about that journey.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's funny because I also wanted to be a doctor. Um, I always knew growing up that I wanted to work with kids. And so I thought I was going to be a pediatrician. Turns out that I have a pretty strong phobia of vomit. So and so then I was like, ooh, maybe this like doctor route is not where I want to go. And so obviously still strong gravitational pull to the science. So I went and got a degree in biology with a minor in chemistry. And I was like, I'm going to be a teacher because I still love children. And I can teach high school students because they don't vomit as much as little kids. And when I was in Scott's program, I completely told him, like, I'm not doing elementary. I'm going to be a high school administrator. I'm not doing elementary. And then this opportunity to work at STEM school kind of fell in my lap. And there was an opening to be a dean K-8, and I loved what STEM kind of offered. Um, and so really like I started out, I was a dean, I was doing elementary and middle school, and I just fell in love with the little kids. And I realized, well, yes, there is vomit. It's not really as bad as I thought it was going to be. And I completely love working with the elementary kids, and I'm not sure that I would ever go back up into high school. Elementary offers just this like really unique perspective on the world. They're still so just young and sometimes like naive, and they just bring this brightness to your day.
Well, I think like, I agree totally. I mean, vomit and all. But the like their curiosity, right? Like
Mhm.
that is like it is innate. They come every day with that. And something happens as they get older. And, I think that's because I do think our high school students need that same level of like, getting them engaged and excited about school. So we have to figure out how to like move that up. But I totally get that like, I feel like when I started as an elementary person and went up to high school, I took a lot of what I did with elementary to the high schoolers and they loved it, and it was like, hey, they're still kids too. They're just big kids. But there's that piece about the, elementary school kids, their natural curiosity and that, how great. I love what, when you said that like a lot of people think of project-based learning, but that idea of problem-based, and that kids are natural. They want to be problem solvers. They want to be solution seekers. They want to, figure out what's going on. They want to tinker with things. They want to unpack stuff. And so I think that's awesome.
Amy, Amy, I really, really loved what you said a few minutes ago about this idea that when kids are engaged, the achievement just follows, right? And so it's not that you have to be nose to the grindstone, chugging through content in order to, do well on whatever achievement measures the state or the feds are throwing at you, right? Um, and I think that's a leap of faith for a lot of school leaders. Like they haven't been immersed in problem-based or project-based or inquiry-based environments, and they don't seem to sort of understand that that is an alternative pathway that will still accomplish whatever state or federal mandates are breathing down your neck, right? And so, it's sort of like, yes, we care that kids, we still want young people to know and be able to do things, but that doesn't necessarily mean scripted curricula and pacing guides and administrators with checklists visiting every classroom every day. Like there's other ways of accomplishing those things, right? But because it's a leap of faith, I'm wondering if you can maybe describe 3 or 4 examples of problem-based learning that you've seen your kids engage in, that you thought were pretty interesting and powerful. Because I think, particularly with the younger learners, a lot of folks are like, oh, well, that stuff's for, high school kids where they can get out and they can communicate and they can do things, blah, blah, blah. Tell us some stories and maybe connect it to some essential, academic learning if need be.
Yeah, I'm so glad you like asked this and I get to like share all the cool examples. Um, because there's a lot and I had to like narrow my list down of like what I was going to share today. But we really tie a lot of our problem-based learning into kind of the science and the social studies realm. Because it fits really naturally there in elementary school. And obviously, like we still have to teach kids how to read and write and do math. Like we still have to teach those basics, but we then expand upon that when we hit that science and social studies curriculum. So first grade. So we're talking about first graders here. Um, they have kind of a problem, and their big overarching problem that they solve in this unit is that you can easily get lost on Colorado's trails. So, what do you do if you get lost? And so, the academic standards that they kind of cover and the academic things that they talk about in this unit is they look at geography. And so, they're looking at maps and they're learning about direction. Um, they learn about light. So, we tied in science. And so, they're learning everything light, but with that twist of like, how can we use light to find our way? And then we do the same thing with sound. So they're learning all the things about sound, but under the guise of how can we use sound to find our way? And then we kind of we partner with Bear Creek Lake Park, which is the state park in Colorado. And they come out and they talk to us about parks and trails and they talk about what happens when hikers get lost. So there's that like community connection. And then the students get to present to the state park representatives like here are our ideas of what we can do to help people from getting lost on Colorado's trails. And so they come up with little ideas of like how can we use light and how can we use sound? How can we have maps available for people who are lost? Um, but it's just a really cool, unique thing. And it really showcases that like yeah they're first graders but they can still think about these kind of problems and these kind of things that apply to the real world. um one of the I think other really big pieces to understand about problem-based learning that I think is so important that I want to share is our community partnerships. So every PBL or every problem that our students are solving, there's some community connection, and we're partnering with industry partners. So for this Colorado Parks and Trails one, we partner with the state park. Um, Another really cool example that I want to share is kindergarten. So again, we're going to talk about kindergarten, but we'll also talk about fifth grade too. So kindergarten has standards that relate to plants. So what plants need to grow. So sunlight, water, all that good stuff. And then they have standards around communities, like what is a community? What makes a community? How do communities operate? And they spend kind of a whole year looking at um, kind of plants, food sustainability. They look at communities around the world. They look at farming aspects. So they're looking at really big picture. And then they kind of come together in the spring and we have a big community kindergarten garden. Um, and so we partner with Denver Urban Gardens. They come out, they teach the kids how to plant the garden, what kind of plants go together. And all of that good stuff. So we have this garden that grows over the summer. And then in the fall, well, let me back up here. So, one year we had our garden, it was growing, looked wonderful, and Highlands Ranch actually got hit by tornadoes. And so we were a direct hit. Our garden was destroyed. So that fall, when we came back in, our fifth graders, one of their kind of problem solving beginning of the year things was, well, how can we protect our garden over the summer from natural elements? So, one of the cool things about our learning model is, yes, we have some kind of PBLs that we do year after year after year with all our students, but we also have those ones that come up when other issues arise and that we do kind of on the spot. So.
Awesome. I'm so excited that you shared some of those. And but now my question is, those are amazing, and I can just picture all the kindergartners and first graders and those awesome experiences. But I'm gonna assume that along the way you've had some challenges or some barriers that have gotten in the way with doing any of these problems or problem-based learning. So can you maybe share with our listeners, other school administrators who are listening to this going that sounds great, but what about when this, and this happens? So, just tell us maybe some of the challenges that you've worked through with this.
Yeah, so I mean, there's always challenges with politics and legislation, right? So a couple of years ago, the state school board said everybody has to adopt a science of reading curriculum. Prior to that, we didn't have an actual curriculum. We used a lot of vertical alignment and collaboration between our teachers for our reading curriculum. We had resources and stuff, but not an actual curriculum. But the legislation came down and said, you guys need to adopt one of these curriculums off of the list, the approved list. So those are some of those challenges where it's I have to follow this, but how can we still stay true to our problem-based learning model? So yeah, we have an actual curriculum that we use to teach our writing, but we're able to embed our PBLs still within science and social studies. And really, we chose a curriculum that models that really well and kind of pulls in a lot of that aspects. So I would say kind of another really big challenge that I know a lot of school administrators are facing across the country is mental health and student behavior. And I think, mental health, I didn't realize what it was like at elementary until I became an elementary administrator, but it's real in elementary schools as well. And so I think one of those challenges is making sure that you just have the right staff and the right amount of support. Because we all know that students, when you think about Maslow's hierarchy, right, we have to make sure that they're ready to learn. So we have to be providing those supports and those things that they need to make sure they're able to learn at that deeper level.
Amy, one of the most important jobs you have as a principal is instructional leadership. What are you doing on a day-to-day basis or week-to-week basis to support sort of the instructional design work of your staff?
Yeah, so great question. We have on staff, we have what we call PBL specialists. And they're kind of like instructional coaches. So they're meeting with teacher teams on a regular basis to help work through some of the challenges within kind of our PBLs, but they also help with forming those partnerships. So like reaching out to industry partners, setting up meetings, setting up times where our students are presenting to those industry partners. So really kind of taking off some of that workload of what it takes to run like that PBL learning model like continuously.
Um, so that's awesome. And you have some dedicated staffing to help with that. I guess what I'm wondering is like, who's helping your teachers design these things? And is that you? Like, are you sitting in on those and chiming in and
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely sit in, I chime in on them. But one of our PBL specialists, she's been here a long time since pretty much the inception of the school. She's a big leader and champion of helping teachers design the PBL. I would say when teachers new to us come in and they haven't been learning under this model, we do some heavy onboarding at the beginning of the year to help kind of at least have them have a general understanding of what PBLs are and what that expectation is. But then we're providing kind of that weekly support where our PBL specialist is coming into those team meetings or meeting one-on-one with teachers to really provide that support. And then on top of that, like vertical alignment is so important with all of this because one, you don't want to like duplicate things like, oh, first grade does this and then they do it in third grade and then they do it in fifth grade. So you want to avoid that, but then also you don't want to create gaps. So vertical alignment and meeting frequently as a whole school to talk through a lot of those pieces is also crucial. Lots of collaboration.
Okay, so question I have for you, as you said, you're a charter school, so a little bit different model. I am, in the traditional public school setting, but you know, like, what would you say to all the principals in traditional school models? Like, is this doable for us? Like, I mean, like, how how do we create the same type of learning environment that you have created here at STEM?
Well, I think it's important to realize that even though they're young students, that they are still very capable of deeper learning. And so when you're thinking about learning in the classroom, it's more than just completing worksheet after worksheet. It's allowing them to have time and space to collaborate with each other. It's posing questions or problems that allow that critical thinking and that problem solving and that just exploring with each other, because I think collaboration is super important, but just giving them time and space to do so instead of just like that drill and kill method that we've done before. Because, like I said at the beginning, students will rise. They want to do this kind of learning, they want to spend the time thinking about problems and coming up with solutions. It drives them and it drives that engagement.
Well, and I think I'm gonna just say another thing here, Scott, of that we just had Scott just led an awesome like little quick learning lab the other night with some principals where we were showing that like, your model is amazing and it's been going for a long time. I think that it's very easy to take like a small piece and start there. That it doesn't have to be a complete kind of overhaul of everything. I mean, eventually you want to get there, but like you just said, zeroing in on the collaboration piece, zeroing in on like, what it is that you're having them work on and solve, and that it's not kind of just the worksheet method. It's that you're working off of their interests, and starting with those kind of areas are definitely key. So I mean, trust me, I think it's all doable in a traditional public school setting. It's just not everybody always feels that way either. So we got to give them a way to get to access that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things I really appreciate about STEM school is it's just its intentionality of structures. You know, I think they've got some practices and processes in place now that more traditional schools would benefit from, just in terms of sort of day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month operation that help build and support and lead to this kind of learning, right? Because again, the students at STEM school have to comply with the state testing mandates just like every other school, right? So, um, Amy, we're kind of nearing the end of our time. What's something that you read or listened to or maybe watched recently that has sort of resonated with you as a school leader?
Oh man, that's wow. That's a good question. So I just actually, and this is not maybe directly related to elementary learning, but just I think learning in general and kind of our students and what they're growing up with and things that they face. But I just finished a book called The Chaos Machine. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's really about social media, and the algorithm and all of that stuff. And I think like that just is going to have such an impact on our future learners, more so than we even know. And so that was just like, I just finished it a couple of weeks ago, and it was so just impactful to think about those kind of things, and how we do that. So.
Yeah, got it. Anything else you want to share with our massive audience of elementary and middle school principals all over the country?
Just, give students the opportunity to talk to one another, to collaborate, to just explore, because they really will rise to the occasion.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Amy, for chatting with us today. And we will definitely include your contact information. So maybe if anybody wants to reach out to Amy and learn more about her school or connect with her. And another way to connect is going to be if you are looking for something to do in the middle of July this summer, the NAESP United Conference, which is with NAESP and NASSP, is happening in Seattle, Washington. I know I'm an East Coast girl, but I'm excited to head over to the West Coast. Scott will be there as well. We will have some really great keynote speakers. We'll have some awesome sessions from different members around the country, and there's just great networking to happen. So definitely, definitely hope to see many of you if you haven't registered yet. It's July 11th through the 13th in Seattle, Washington. That is all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for joining in and listening to the NAESP Principal Podcast, and looking forward to future conversations.